So, HexJuice has recently made her return to Gacha. Yippee! Everybody loved that, okay? I missed Hex. She is a great creator, an amazing creator in the space, and I feel like all of us have kind of missed her presence. And now she's back and she's making like scripted videos. And now she's giving her take and her reasoning behind the real truth behind power creep in Gacha. As we all know, the power creep conversation was something that's been had recently. Started by a little Mr. Dookie, a little Mr. He made some things about power creep. He made some kind of crazy takes.
Source! My source is I made it the fuck up.
And Hex is going to dive into the real truth behind power creep and Gacha. So I'm excited to see what she has to say about it. And let's let it go. What are you going to say? HexJuice. What are you going to say?
As I've been getting back into the gacha space, there's been a big conversation about the concept of power creep. This particular time was about Honkai Star Rail, starting with a tweet by Mr. Pokey, and I was super surprised by how long this discussion went on. This was certainly not the first time this debate has been brought up.
A long
and
time.
Definitely
Bro,
not.
This went on for a while. Like, I want to say like maybe 2 weeks. Like a 2-week long discussion about power creep. I think almost every creator basically got involved at one point. I think literally every gacha creator you could think of got involved in the power creep discussion. And I feel like, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of us have a similar view. Like, at the end of the day, it's the devs who make the systems that we have to power creep in the first place. So, you know, it's what it is. But Mr. Pokey's like, nah. You can still solve it by pulling better. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't negate the actual problem of power creep in the first place. Yeah, you know, it is what it is.
Not be the last time we have to hear about power creep in gacha games. However, one thing I did notice while watching 15 debates with what felt like 500 different creators is that we all kind of suck at talking about power creep.
Subscribe! I am personally offended that she said that I suck. I'm gonna unsubscribe.
So while I know this is a little bit late to the party, I wanted to get some more scripting practice in and talk about the concept of power creep, what it is, why it happens, and hopefully get some more of a baseline down for everyone in gacha so that next time this conversation comes up, we can talk about it more effectively, and maybe even finish the debate in 1 or 2 conversations instead of 50 billion.
Nah, that's lack of content. I love you, Hex, that's lack of content. We need to stretch this out to, I think, 500 videos. I think actually we need more videos. We need... Hi, Hex. I think she's wrong. We need to stretch it out to at least 500 videos rather than 2, to be honest. We need more content around the singular discussion of power creep. I think everybody would love that.
At the most basic question, what is power creep? The Google AI definition, which I think sums it up pretty nicely, is
Google AI? Okay, she's used AI. That's it. We're canceling her. AI users, get out of here, bro. She's AI. I'm done.
Power creep is the process of making new content in a game more powerful than existing content. This is a phenomenon that happens far beyond gacha games and can be seen in card games like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon. And Google AI also says it happens in World of Warcraft, which
oh my, that reminds me, do you know what the game that has the worst power creep that I've ever experienced? Fucking Hearthstone! Bro, Hearthstone! That game, oh my god. Within like a year, that game basically became unplayable for me. Oh my, holy fuck. Yeah, Hearthstone. Anyway, sorry.
I don't know anything about, so I'm just kind of taking its word for it. Before we move on, I want to establish that I believe that this definition is an extremely simplified baseline, and more of a catch-all umbrella term for many things that most people refer to generally as power creep. I also think that this very simplified definition is a primary culprit for why gacha creators aren't the most effective at discussing this topic, but we'll get more into that later. The next question is, why does power creep happen? What many of the games that experience power...
Because the devs need to create problems to sell solutions to us for. That's how they make their money, right? It's how they make their money. They gotta make problems and sell the solution. Otherwise, why the fuck would anyone pull on anything new? That's what I think anyway.
power creep have in common is that they don't have the ability to go back and change old content. In a game like League of Legends or Valorant, character stats can be adjusted and their whole ability kits can be changed to help them keep up with the current state of the meta. However, in a card game like Magic the Gathering, the only change that can be made to a card after being printed is to ban it from play if it's too strong, so power creep happens pretty regularly. This is also true of gacha games. Characters are not typically ever directly changed after release because people spend their money and time to get them.
Because their characters aren't hot enough to make people pull with their dick. True.
Those characters, it's not like the developers can just go back and adjust their stats and abilities willy-nilly. I believe there might also be laws about this, at least in China, where a lot of gacha game developers are based. But at the end of the day, the point is that retroactively changing
that's true, there are laws.
directly
That's pretty
is
interesting.
typically not done in gacha games. The only example I can personally think of are the Geo and Zhongli changes that happened in.
That was insane. Bro, China going, bro, oh my god. The whole Zhongli situation was actually, the Zhongli situation was crazy. They actually changed him. Because he is supposed to be the China Archon, right? And if China Archon is bad, oh no. No. We gotta do that. We gotta change that, you know? Not a good look on our part.
In Genshin Impact, though I'm pretty sure there are others that y'all could share. Since characters are not changed after release, the only way a character can be buffed or nerfed is indirectly through the release of new units, new mechanics, new enemies, and bosses. For example, if your character is a water type DPS character that has maybe an average level of power, it can be indirectly buffed to the top of the meta if the game releases a powerful new support for water type DPSs. It can also be nerfed if the current endgame content has bosses that are resistant to water type damage. I want to be clear here, power creep is 100% inevitable in gacha games. These are live service games that make money off of releasing new characters, and many gacha games incentivize players to pull on those characters by specifically catering endgame content to the most recently released unit.
Honkai Star Rail is just the perfect example of that, right? Like, whatever the new, like, not ailment, what do they call it? Like, we had the Trotters at one point, right? So AoE characters would be better in that regard than others. You know what I mean? Like, it really depends what the gimmick of the week is, right? For the endgame contents. You know, we'll make certain characters better than others. It just is what it is, right? Otherwise, these games will become boring. You'll just use the same characters over and over and over again. It'll just be kind of ass, right? It would be boring as fuck.
We have to remember that at base, gacha games are designed to be predatory and they try to incentivize people to indulge in the gacha system, which is essentially gambling. Then what's the problem with power creep if every game does it and it's inherently part of gacha game?
Oh my god. If it happens too quickly. I think that's what people have a problem with most, right? If it happens too fucking quickly.
Design, you might ask. The problem is that not every form of power creep is created equal, and some power creep is done intentionally by gacha developers as a predatory practice to put pressure on players to pull characters. Here is the first distinction I want to make regarding power creep in gacha. As I've mentioned before, power creep can occur by two primary functions in single-player gacha games. Please note that I'm not really speaking on PvP gachas because the only one I've ever played is Koki Run Kingdom, and I didn't really get into that part of the game. So the first function is via the characters directly, and the second is by the environment in which you play those characters. This includes the enemies, bosses, battle mechanics, and more that can be introduced into the game by the devs. I'm going to call these internal and external power creep respectively. My personal opinion is that
my voice on 1x speed is making me schizo. No, I feel that though. I always listen to myself in 2x, so when I hear it back in 1x, I'm like, oh fuck. Can she hurry up? Can she get to the fucking point?
Internal power creep via characters being released is absolutely a given in gacha games, and external power creep is the much trickier version that devs often tend to use to be more predatory than average. Also, if I like to call the external is the gimmick of the week. Whatever the devs decide to be gimmick of the week, that's going to be your external. If there are any actual terms already for these concepts, please let me know. I'm just kind of making up as I go along here, and I'd love to learn if there's anything to read. The next distinction I'd like to make is one that was actually brought up to me on Twitter, and I think it's super valuable. This is the chart that was provided, and I don't really know who made this originally, but thanks for the info from this very fine Twitter denizen. So now we have two more distinctions, which are absolute power creep and relative power creep. If you want to really simplify it down, these are more or less bad power creep and good, or at least neutral power creep. With absolute power creep, a new, stronger unit is directly stronger than old units as a core part of its design. The unit makes older units completely obsolete, thereby devaluing the investments by players into those characters. Absolute power creep also has a negative impact on the game state as a whole. Due to the newer unit being so objectively strong, it discourages variety in gameplay and makes the meta of the game overall much more simple and much more specific. It's due to the negative side effects of absolute power creep that I'm terming it bad power creep. With relative power creep, while the character might be stronger than other units,
absolute is definitely
still
worse.
allows older units to be played relatively easily.
It's intrinsic
the new
to the
character
characters
introduces
themselves.
mechanics or synergies that encourage players to create many strategies to complete content, and older units retain value even if they aren't as strong as the power creeping unit. Since relative power creep enhances the game by introducing more complex strategies and a richer environment for the meta, I'm going to be calling it good power creep. This is why I said that power creep is an umbrella term that is used as a catch-all for many things in the gacha community.
Here's my thing. She's saying that it's good power creep, and I could say because it's a power creep that can be changed and gotten rid of, right? You can add it on, you can take it away. It's not permanently placed into the game, right? But when it becomes a meta theme for like 6 months, it depends how long that lasts, right? If it's a form of power creep that lasts like 6 months into a life cycle of the game and then gets taken out in place of something else, to me, that good power creep then can become bad because it becomes the meta to deal with. You have to pull for characters to deal with the external thing that they put in the game for an extended period of time. So I think the good power creep can very easily become bad, right? Like, again, the whole Super Break meta. It's a mechanic that was put into the game that can very quickly become bad to the player when it's there for too long, right? It's very different from like, oh, here are a couple of trotters that appear in the MOC that you have to kill because it does more damage to the bosses, right? I feel like good power creep can also become bad.
When we talk about power creep in a gacha game, what do we mean? Do we mean internal power creep or external power creep? Absolute or relative? If we can't make these distinctions, it's really easy to flatten down these conversations. After all, if power creep...
Because it limits meta. True, but it's like a half and half, right? It's like an external thing, but also, to use your definitions, it's both like external and internal, right? They could put external mechanics that they could place in and out of the game at any time, but they have characters that are, you know, inherently will use those mechanics to their advantage or not. So it's like a mix of both that come together to make it bad, right? They both gel, and it's like, ooh, then it becomes like ass.
Creep happens in every gacha game. Does that mean it's fine? Why are you tourists complaining about it? You clearly don't even understand what a gacha game is if you're complaining about power creep. You're just stupid and lazy. But that's the thing. Power creep is a fine line, a razor's edge that gacha developers walk very intentionally to keep their games making money and retaining relevancy. In most gacha games, standard banner characters are power crept relatively quickly.
Oh my god. Unless, guys, unless you're playing Wuthering Waves. Wuthering Waves has amazing standard character banners, right? For example, Verena. If you get an S2 Verena, you should be happy with yourself. You should be happy to have that. You know what I mean? So all these other gacha games, yeah, they don't hold a candle to Woowa, man. Because Woowa standard ones, pretty pog. Sorry, I have to do my daily glazing of Woowa here. You know, I've got to chill a little bit. You know what I mean?
Since they can usually be obtained over time as you pull for units and lose 50/50s. The dev doesn't want you to be perfectly satisfied with the performance of those free or cheaper units because they want you to pull for new premium characters. But that doesn't mean those characters are unusably bad in all of those games. If a dev really wants to push you to pull a character, that unit will usually be relatively strong and power creep other units. They'll add mechanics in the endgame content that caters to the specialty of that character very specifically, and they'll also probably do some really sweet marketing and trailers to get you emotionally invested in the character. I want to give an example of what I feel was a positive instance of power creep. Sometimes devs want to shake up the meta due to its becoming stale or incentivize players to pull in a type of unit that isn't very popular. An example of this is in Inazuma with Genshin Impact. There was an insane shield meta at the time because Zhongli was so incredibly strong, which made most healing characters effectively useless. After all, Why heal something when you could just not?
Still kind of true, by the way. Still kind of true. Like, even to this day, you think Zhongli is still used on like 90% of people's Spiral Abyss like tries. Even though we have a whole bunch of new and interesting healers these days, like Kuki, you've got like Farina at some point. Do you know what I mean? Still, people will always use their shields.
Not take any damage. So Hoyo introduced these fuck-ass dogs that would damage you even through a shield and made healers a lot more useful. This was a form of external power creep and internal power creep, as they also released Kokomi, a very powerful healer, at the same time. Personally though, I just continued to play with Zhongli and my C6 Diona and did enough damage fast enough that I could still complete Spiral Abyss. Zhongli was also still very useful, and I believe he's still considered strong even now, 4 years later. Personally,
he's still meta in a way. I think everybody still uses him at some point.
I thought this was a good power creep situation because it created more complexity in the meta. Before then, it was just use shield Unga Bunga. Now, you had more viable characters to play and could still use your Unga Bunga shield as long as you didn't get hit by the dog's dot effect or bleed out.
The problem is, those dogs don't appear very often now, right? Like, it's only very certain small instances where, like, an anti-shield thing would be present. So most of the time, you could still, like, Unga Bunga shield, right, with Zhongli, unfortunately, right? Again, it depends how long these mechanics last in the game, to be honest. But you can't expect them to be there forever. But no, she's right. It's an example of like power creep that's like good for switching things up. Absolutely.
Out before finishing the floor of the abyss. Power creep can also be considered good or relative when it can be mitigated by the investment of the players at a reasonable amount. However, there is unfortunately a lot of nuance to this. In many gachas, it is possible to literally play any—
Of course they don't appear anymore. Yeah, exactly, right? They do that to sell you Kokomi. And then once they're gone, that's it. Every move a gacha company makes is intentional, right? They will always create their games to sell you whatever the fuck is next on the list, right? It is. We just have to accept that fact, right? It just is what it is.
Any unit, as long as you invest in them extremely heavily, which usually takes several months.
Zhongli's weapon is useless. True. I use Staff of Homer in my Zhongli. I'll be real. All right.
Going to be particularly incentivized to do this if the investment is higher than the actual benefit of getting to use the character. Usually it's kind of done when people really like a character. In other games, the power creep gets so severe that older units are almost completely unplayable no matter the level of investment. I've been told an example of this is Tower of Fantasy, which is pretty well known in the gacha space for having—
Giteo is crying right now. Giteo is crying. I don't know about Tower Fantasy, but my god. Yeah, I've heard some stories.
Severe power creep, though I'll be honest that I've not played enough of it myself to have personally formed an opinion on this. The problem with investment for players and mitigating power creep is when the amount of investment needed is significantly less for new units than for older units. If you can use a newer unit and instantly blast through endgame content, that is a problem with power creep if the older units require you to work months and months and months continuously to keep them viable.
True.
Now that we've established the extreme poles of good and bad power creep, we have to think about all of the shades of gray in the middle. What about a game where the power creep isn't so severe that older units are completely unplayable, but they do require a significantly higher level of investment, even if they're not very old?
Then the company will just put out a 5-star support. Yeah, they'll just put out a 5-star support and then suddenly they'll be really good. But also the problem with that is that every other character also becomes better. So the new characters become extra good and the old characters still— it's like they raised the bar for everybody. So you think old characters can catch up, but really the new characters are like still even better than you thought with the supports. It's difficult. Game design is hard, right? It's hard to balance those things.
Old compared to newer units with more powerful mechanics. In the case where you really want to use a specific character, if the game requires you to get multiple new units to make that older unit even functional, is that a positive example of power creep? Some games release new units extremely rapidly, meaning that power creep is inevitably happening a lot more quickly. And investing in units at a low real-life monetary cost might take longer than the actual amount of time the unit is viable in the meta. Is this beneficial to the player? Manipulative FOMO tactics are common in gacha games. Gacha developers are also very aware of the sunken cost fallacy experienced by their players. When power creep is used as a weapon against players, they bank on the fact that players will continue to pull on characters because they've already spent so much time and money on their account and they don't want to feel like they've wasted it.
This is why, okay, Wu is on the screen, right? This is why Wuthering Waves is hella based, because they have an example of power creep that isn't to do with external mechanics and isn't to do with intrinsic power of characters at their base form. They actually release, like, for example, echoes that just make all the old characters more powerful, right? The Nightmare echoes that they've released actually make your units like 20%, 30% better than they were before. Like, it's actually insane. Like, new sets and new echoes to make you specifically for older characters that make them good, right? There's no Nightmare echo for Carlotta, right? But there are ones for all the other 1.0 characters. And that's an example of power creep that is completely positive. It's just completely positive. There's nothing bad about that whatsoever, right? Your older characters are now just buffed innately and will just do more damage. That's it. You don't have to pull more. You don't have to do whatever. It's just a bit of a grind, and that's it, right? That's why Wu is kind of based. It's really kind of based. Yeah, it's a thoughtful way to... I'm gonna end my entire existence. Bro, Elon Musk, I'm going to find you.
I'm coming after you.
Elon Musk, I'm going to find you, okay? And we're gonna have problems. We're gonna have oh my god, everything's fallen over. Oh my god, it's over. Pack it up, pack up the bags, bro.
Less overlooked. When it happens relatively often, it should be looked at with a more critical eye. There is a baseline level of predatory behavior that gacha players have ultimately decided to accept by playing the games. When power creep starts to feel bad for the average player and disincentivizes them from continuing to play or pull for characters, that's a problem. Additionally, because gambling addiction is absolutely a problem in gacha games, even if everyone tries to deny it, there will also be players who are pushed further into their addiction when developers use these practices without caution.
Honestly, if you have a gambling problem, you should just not play gacha games. Bro, if you have an addictive personality like that, bro, it's such a hole. It's such a hole. Not only for fun and gameplay, but for, bro, so many reasons. So many reasons.
Even those who don't struggle specifically with gambling addiction can be pressured into these new units when power creep is too severe. At the
FOMO can get everyone, even if you have a gambling addiction or not. Like, FOMO affects everybody to a certain extent. So you don't even have to have that little feeling in your head of, oh, maybe gambling is a thing that's like a problem for me. Everybody experiences FOMO.
At the end of the day, power creep in gacha is inevitable and can be used as a tool by developers to make the game better, more interesting, and honestly, very engaging to play. But a screwdriver can be a shiv in the hands of the wrong person, and power creep can also be used as a weapon to squeeze the player base of their time and money. As always, there is personal accountability to know when it's time to stop, and if you're having a hard time resisting the urge to pull in a gacha game, it's probably time to take a break and reevaluate. But next time,
I will Essex Brent, and I will spend all the money that I have to do so. I will Essex Brent. That analogy, it was a really good analogy.
We have the inevitable debate of power creep in gacha games. I'd like to suggest a few questions we can use to guide the conversation. 1, what kind of power creep is occurring? What are we talking about right now? Is it internal or external? Is it absolute or relative? Does this power creep add complexity to the game and its mechanics, or does it make it very simplistic, where it feels like a paint-by-numbers meta where you plug in the right units, even at mediocre investment, to win? Is the amount of investment via time, money, whatever, required by players to keep up with the power creep reasonable for players of varying amounts of commitment to the game? While high commitment players will always feel the investment is reasonable, what about average or middle commitment players that often make up the majority of the player base?
Sure.
While there is...
I think dolphins are the majority of players. Dolphins are absolutely the majority of players. The light spenders, the battle passes, the monthly passes, they are the majority of these games.
Necessary in any gacha game, especially if you're free to play or low cost. Does power creep make this amount of planning significantly more time consuming? Can one bad character investment make it feel like your account is set back by several months? Has the power creep in whatever game we're talking about become a pattern over time rather than something that's a one-off or relatively infrequent? Finally, Does the power creep serve the players in any conceivable way, for example, by creating a more diverse meta environment, or does it only serve to make predatory behaviors in the game more intense? If we can answer these questions first, I genuinely believe we can come to an easier consensus on power creep discussions in the future if everyone comes into them with good faith and with the same goal. So, there is my power creep yapathon. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Let me know what you think down below, and also let me know how you feel about this scripted format for videos. I feel like it's a lot easier to organize my thoughts this way, and I'll probably use it for very specific topics where I have a lot of thoughts, though probably never every video. Anyways, remember, there is more to life than gacha games. Touch grass, brush your teeth, take care of yourself. See y'all later. Bye!
This is a great video. This was a great video. This was an absolute W video. W video. I think she brought up some very valid points, some good terms to describe different kinds of power creep, which I think is a very important distinction to have. Absolutely W. I love this scripted content for Hex, and I can't wait to see more of it. Absolutely base. Remember to go and subscribe, okay? Make sure to go give it a like, go give it a comment, all that good stuff. I'm sure all of you are subbed already, but if you want to go do that, like, comment, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. What do you think? All right, peace. You didn't suck my dick after I'm starting drama. Listen, I'll do it. I'll get on my knees.